All right, welcome everybody to another edition of Spotlight on Addiction and Recovery. I'm your host, Scott Jones. We got a great show today. We're going to be talking about some great tools that can be used by therapists, treatment centers, and of course anybody in the mental health field as well to help identify problems. And with that, we have my friend Travis Gray. And Travis, how are you?
I'm doing good, Scott. Thanks for having me today.
Of course, man. Now we met because we have a treatment center that we do work with, and you're working with them as well. But we got to talking, and you've got some really cool things that I'd love to talk to you about. But first of all, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about your background? Where are you coming from?
Sure. So as you mentioned, my name is Travis Gray. I'm a licensed mental health counselor here in South Florida. I'm also a certified addiction professional, and I'm a qualified supervisor for LMHCs. I do trauma therapy. I'm EMDR trained, and I've been working in this field for maybe about 10 years or so. This was kind of a career shift for me. Prior to this, I worked doing project management and things like that.
Okay.
So that was after my time in the military. So I ended up shifting gears and getting into a lot of the helping field and trying to figure out a really good way of helping people, the fastest way. And so when I went to school back in 2008, I was looking for a lot of answers about how to really understand people, how to get to the crux of what's going on. And of course, anyone who's going to school, you would know that you get introduced to a lot of generalized theory, but you don't get down to some very effective ways to engage with people and to really kind of root out what's happening with them, and to understand them and like what's the message behind their behaviors, what's the unmet need. So for me, I really wanted to streamline a process because I was in a pursuit of truth for myself and trying to figure out some things inside of me I didn't quite get, and it was really bothering me, because I could figure a lot of things out in my life, but I couldn't figure. There's something inside internally happening that I couldn't figure out. So that really vexed me, tremendously. And so I've spent, the last 10 years on this pursuit of truth and trying to find a theory and a model and a way to really engage with people that's very truthful, that helps them understand why they do what they do, why they get stuck, why they're stuck in the same, what I call an emotional template, about why they respond to the world the way they do, why they see themselves and others and through the filter that they do. And I really wanted to bring something of value that people are searching and looking for help, because, man, I can tell you, there's a lot of therapists around, and it's really just a game of hit or miss. You might find somebody who maybe has a pretty decent modality and a good understanding of the theory, but they don't have the right energy to match with you, and there's not a lot of safety with that person. Okay. And a lot of people can kind of give up, looking for a decent therapist, or the amount of money they have to pay for, good therapists. There's so many deterring factors for people that they kind of give up looking for help, and they're not getting what they need. So for me, I really wanted to bring something to the world that would help people to understand themselves very clearly, very quickly. And my assessment, which is the Comprehensive Emotional Memory Assessment, also called the CEMA for short. So in the CEMA, I basically go through a diagnostic interview with people based upon all their presenting problems, whether it's the addiction issues, the mental health problems, anxiety, depression, isolation, sabotage, being disloyal to yourself and overlook the bad things in your life, or whatever the issue is. And there's a lot of different issues that can pop up I've seen over the years. And as I do this, it helps me get down to what this really is, and I can do it in one session without having any background information about you. It's just a series of questions and trusting my intuition, and I've put together a whole modality of a diagnostic interview with people to understand how you got where you are, and if you're looking for emotional freedom, how to get back to that space. And it's all based off of systems that are theorized through human growth and development, attachment, and your exposure to, let's say, trauma, whether it's a capital T trauma or a lower T trauma, whatever that is. And I'll talk about that today. But
so basically, there's a lot of people out there that can identify the symptomology or the signs of their problem or the end result of problems that they have, but they don't know the cause. So right. I know I get angry, but I don't know what's causing that anger. I don't know what's behind that. Yeah. I know I steal or I'm a thief or I lie, but I don't know what's behind that. So a lot of people spend a lot of time trying to fix the end result when it doesn't get fixed because you don't know what's beginning it, what the start is. So that's really what you're looking for, are those underlying reasons for doing what you do.
Yeah, it's the root.
And that's the goal of all therapy, is the truth. But in most cases, you're right. It's difficult because, one, it takes a lot of time to dig in there.
It does.
Unless you have some sort of evaluation tool like what you're talking about,
Yeah.
where you can kind of like, I assume it's through many points of algorithms of, when they answer this way and then you combine it with this answer, you come up with a pattern. Is that correct?
Yeah, so if I were to put it into a mathematical equation and create some algorithm, then I would probably do that in some type of a automated format, like an app. And I would ask you a question, and you would say yes or no to this, and then based upon yes or no, ask another question, and then I put that in algorithm, and that would lead to, most likely, here's the outcome. And people do this all the time. They do all kinds of assessments and surveys on their websites, and it's a way to generate like a passive income. Someone comes on there and they answer 140 questions, and then yes or no, and then based upon your answers, it gives you a most likely probability you're this kind of personality type or you have this issue.
Right.
My assessment isn't based off an algorithm. It's based off of these series of questions, and these series of questions, they all operate off of a system, right? It's like, to just give you a basic example, right? If someone says, "Hey, I've struggled with anxiety most of my life," right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, some people have different degrees of insight. Some people understand anxiety. Some people don't. Some people say, I don't really have anxiety, but they're always fidgety. They have constant racing thoughts. They have insomnia, but they don't identify it as anxiety. They just think maybe, they call it something else. But the bottom line is, if someone has anxiety, there's literally no exception to this rule. It's always rooted in fear. And there's four principal fears that are out there that I've seen in my time, in my experience in life, and just with people. There's a fear of failure or inadequacy. There's a fear of rejection. There's a fear of abandonment, and there's a fear of the unknown. And when you look at these fears, there's really not much more beyond that can generate anxiety. Because,
right.
Scott, if you were perfectly loved and you knew all your needs were perfectly taken care of, you would never be abandoned, you'd never be rejected, you'd never be judged, you would always have enough in your life, and you'd always be okay, you would literally be in a space of internal peace, mental peace. If you not just knew it here, but it was downloaded and it was integrated into your nervous system.
Right.
You'd be a very peaceful person all the time. So the part of what just to give you like one example, is when I go through the thing about anxiety again, just to touch on that, the root of it is a fear. Now that fear is something that was brought into your life at some point, right? It's something that's trapped into your nervous system. So even from the point of conception in the womb, a human baby, and especially as we develop after birth, we have these five senses, and everything in our five senses is integrated into our body, and we have this incredible supercomputer called the brain, and this stores so much information, everything. That's why you can hear a song from when you were a kid, and it's like, I know that song, and then
right.
And it's there. There's always something there. And so what people need to realize is, what you experience in terms of negative consequential issues of depression, anxiety. Let's say you can't make a decision about anything unless somebody puts a stamp of approval on it. You're always fawning. You're always, people pleasing. That's happening for a reason. You weren't born that way. There's something that's happening that is integrated into your belief system throughout the course of your life, and some things could be very, very subtle, and some things could be much more traumatic and much more obvious. And so, this is a difference between a capital T trauma and a lowercase trauma, right? A lowercase t trauma. The capital T is like, hey, did you have physical, sexual, chronic emotional abuse? Did you have a near-death experience? Did someone leave you at a really critical time and it just traumatized you, and you always spend your whole life in a state of fear and worry that someone's going to ban you again. Those are capital T traumas. People who are first responders, they're exposed to very traumatic images in stressful situations over and over and over. That's a capital T trauma. But for the average person that says, I don't have any of those, but I don't understand why I have these problems and I have these limiting beliefs and why I'm so afraid to do anything in my life, or why I don't trust anybody, it's very, that's where someone who's not particularly trained on how to assess that can skim right over it and miss something. It's important to look at the manifestations that happen in the presenting problems, because every presenting problem has a root to it. They all do, or wouldn't be there. And so for example, there was a girl that I had worked with. She was probably in her late 20s, early 30s. She had come to treatment 5 or 6 years ago in some place here locally. And when she did her biopsychosocial, gathering all information, trauma assessment, no trauma, grew up in a really nice Midwestern home, very passive, nice parents. She always excelled in everything, right? You know, she was an overachiever, chronic hero child. And by the way, just side note, I think hero children have it the worst, to be honest. It's the hardest survival strategy to break out of, to be honest. But
because you become practiced at not asking for your own needs to be met and putting your own emotions aside as not being valid in the moment when everyone else's are. So I do get that. Yes.
Yeah, and there's so much pressure to be high functioning all the time.
Yeah.
And you're never allowed to take off a mask and expose an authentic self. That's down there. That may be doing something because you felt pressure to do it, but it's not really who you are. And it's not what you want to do, but you're too afraid to break out of the mold of being this high-functioning person. And in some ways, they actually have it the worst, in some ways, even though it seems like they have it the easiest, and everybody compares to them, but it's not true. Anyway, so this was your quintessential hero child. But when I went through the whole assessment with her, I started talking more, looking for covert forms of trauma or lower T traumas. And she grew up in a home where nobody talked about anything, ever. There was an elephant in the room, and you learn just to suppress all of your emotions. And on another side note, to say very quickly, suppressing your emotions is probably the worst thing you can do, because it all comes out sideways.
Right.
It's all very bad because it has to. But so we got into this assessment more, and she had a very difficult time with asking for help. She never wanted to show any weakness. She never wanted to be emotionally vulnerable. She was not accustomed to speaking openly about how she felt, so she had no real endurance for any kind of distress at all, like nothing.
Right.
And so if somebody was upset with her, it literally bothered her in her stomach. She'd get in a knot. She was very emotionally sensitive and in some way unexposed. And so she just suppressed all these resentments and all these constant pressure, but it's not what she wanted to do, and she couldn't connect with her authentic self, didn't have the courage to say it. So she ended up, and whenever she would drink, it would all come out very ugly because, alcohol interacts with this neurochemical in our brain, which is like this neural inhibitor.
Right.
And that's why people say, well, take a shot of liquid courage. If you don't want to experience rejection, just go and do this because it takes the edge off. And if I'm in a sober state of mind, I live in a state of conditioning, programming, and fear where I can't say what I really feel, and I'm detached from it. But whenever I drink, either someone who in their life could be very rigid and very controlling and very cold, they become very warm and loving because that's who they are at the core and they want to be, but they don't know how to do it. Or someone who's very passive and disconnected become very angry and very violent and very volatile.
See, let me follow this train, because I think a lot of people get confused by this. They believe that when they are under the influence of, like, alcohol, like myself when I was in my addiction, that I become something that I'm not. When what you're kind of telling us is you become more of what you really are, just with no filter.
Exactly.
So the anger and the violence that I portrayed in my drinking was a real core piece of me, which I have come to understand myself over the years.
It was something that you suppressed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was, when I was young, I went through some abuse situations and other things. I carried that with me, and it manifested itself into me being abusive. But I was always able to keep that in check unless I was drinking.
Exactly.
Then it would come out, and it
100%.
was scary. It was scary what I could become.
Yeah.
So how do people reconcile that the monster that they see is really at your core? How do you reconcile that with somebody?
Well, I look at it, and I try to explain it from...
It's not always a monster, I know that.
Yeah, it's not always a monster. I mean, like I said, sometimes it's the opposite. You have people that are very cold, and they're not touchy-feely at all when they're sober, and they're just very organized, and this is what it is. But whenever they drink, they get much more warm and touchy and lovey and, and affectionate, because there's something deep inside that they need to be able to get access to, right? So if you've had past traumas, again, the nervous system and the body have to store all that. It gets stored in our body, which is why people experience even, people have noticed some people even experience kind of cancer sometimes, because some of it's very emotional in nature. It's an unprocessed wound that our bodies are hanging on to. So the goal of therapy is to say, well, is there something that's trapped down there, because you have a survival strategy in the world, right? And part of the survival strategy is to be a hero child. Ask for nothing, need nothing, always be high functioning, and show everybody, hey, we're doing great because I'm doing so wonderful in life, and everything comes easily to me. That may not be who the person is at the core and what they really want, and that could literally be survival strategy. Same thing for like being someone's caretaker. Some people grew up with very chaotic, emotionally unhealthy parents that for a child, Scott, children can't suffer rejection. They can't suffer abandonment, and they will literally do anything to adapt to the primary caregivers in their life.
Yeah.
Even if that means that they take a role where they feel responsible to manage them, and they become hyper vigilant to always read all the time. Is there stress in the house? Are we talking about what's going on? Are you safe? It's like I'm always keeping tabs on you. And what happens for caretakers is they end up becoming so externally attuned to someone else and becoming hypervigilant about your emotional energy level. So if you're always like ready to burst out with anger, or people walk on eggshells around you, then their nervous system picks up on this. And this happens with kids even in a pre-verbal state, right? Their nervous system picks up on this, and that puts them into a sympathetic state where they experience anxiety. So a lot of times you see people that have ADD, ADHD diagnoses, but when it comes to kids, anxiety and ADHD are identical in the symptoms, right? And it's being in a sympathetic state all the time. They can't focus because there's too much stimulation happening in the nervous system because I don't feel safe.
Right.
And when you see people that grow up in their life and they do not feel safe, like I'm not protected, I'm not covered, I can't take care of anything, and they've made an agreement in their heart with this belief, like I'm really not safe, they experience tremendous anxiety. It puts them in a sympathetic state. And what they want to do when they get in that sympathetic state is they want to find a substance that is going to help them come back down to ventral vagal state, which is going to be alcohol, marijuana, benzos, opiates. Those are all great to help your nervous system come down to a state where you feel calm. That's all people are really looking for. So substance abuse, process addictions, it's all really about understanding what's at the root of some chronic emotional pain, what's an unmet need, what are skill developments you don't have. And going back to this girl I was telling you about, and I want to circle back around to your question about how do you reconcile, was there something inside, because that's important. I want to talk about that. When I started to ask her the different kind of questions, like what are you not allowed to do, and what happens if you have to set a boundary and say no. And she talks about the actual feeling somatically she experiences when this happens. And it's a lot of distress, and she just didn't have thick skin to deal with conflict, and it was a skill she had to develop, because if she didn't do it, she would live in false peace and have to absorb constant amount of stress, resentment, and she would stay in a very negative loop in her mind, which kept her anxiety really high. And she would always be prone to self-medicate. And even if she were to stop drinking, she would never have any emotional freedom if she didn't break out of the cycle and challenge some of those fears and find her voice and learn to integrate what's down there, what's telling her you need to bring this up and make this whole, make it more congruent with who you are. If she didn't do that, then she would have been stuck her whole life, constantly feeling misunderstood,
Right.
constantly feeling used, constantly feeling hurt, constantly feeling powerless. And there's no way someone can feel good in their life, in their own skin, feeling like that. So it's very important to look at people as a whole and to understand what everybody needs, because we all need at the core as human beings. It doesn't matter if you're a man, if you're a woman, your religious background. It doesn't matter if you're, the color of your skin, what language you speak, whatever kind of influences you have, social, economic status. At the core, we all need the same thing, right? We all do, Scott. We all need to know that we're seen. We all need to be important to somebody. We all need meaningful, deep connections, right? This is everything in our DNA is made for that. We all need air. We all need food. We all need hydration. Everyone's body has sexual energy that you got to do something with. Mm-hmm. We all need purpose. We all need the opportunity to step into something that's very deeply fulfilling for us. And so if you look at people, we have way more in common than we do different. That separates us. We have way more in common. So that's why the semen works, regardless of who you are, is because it operates on this basic principle that we all need the same thing. And if I know that I need something, then it gives me a map to understand the systems about when something is popping up all right, I think I know where to start looking about what could be happening deeper at the root of this. And so that's the model that I put together over the last 6 years. I meet with people typically in treatment centers or in my private practice, and like I said, I don't need to know any background information about you. I can just ask you a series of questions, and then within one session, I can see you. And once I see you, I can help you understand yourself and de-shame all those things. And
now, there's going to be an assumption that they're going to honestly answer these questions.
Correct.
Because
Correct.
a lot of times people who are hiding their what I like to call the deep darkies, the deep dark secrets and all those things, will go to any length, including not trusting enough to answer things honestly.
Correct.
Do you have any strategies to get around that at all? Or, or is that there has to be a modicum of willingness, am I correct?
Yeah, so I tell people, great question. So I tell people from the get-go, that as long as you're intellectually and emotionally honest, you're gonna get what you're looking for out of this. If you want to come here and if I want to ask you a direct, honest question, and you can't, and you don't want to respond because you don't like the way it sounds, or it's a part of yourself that you reject and you're afraid to speak it because then I'll see it too.
Right.
Depending on the person, I'll kind of do more groundwork and I'll address that in the beginning. And I let people know where I come from because, as you know, like my energy and my presentation, I'm very calm, and that's part of what all this is just co-regulation, right? People learn to get regulated from other people, So if you're around someone who's very chaotic and very anxious and very unpredictable, you your whole nervous system reacts to them. If you're around someone who's very calm, then that's called co-regulation.
Okay.
And so part of the reason why I'm monotone and I'm very calm is because it helps co-regulate people around me and it gives them a little bit more of a trust. And when I speak with them, I try to speak into something, and particularly if I intuitively feel that someone is hides and they lie to themselves a lot, I'll kind of lay more groundwork with that, and I'll say, please, this is just for you. You have full confidentiality. I'm going to ask you a question, and if I still ask the question and I feel like they're being deceptive, then I'll just very gently, the delivery is very soft, but I'm very direct with them, and I'll be like, my feeling is you're hiding something right now. Is that true or am I wrong?
So this tool, if I can call it a tool, for evaluation and things, won't work unless you have the right person doing it. You have to build that rapport. You have to do those things in order for it to be in some cases, because you do have people who are going to be a lot of people who have trauma, Travis, they're not quick to trust.
That's true.
And the last thing they want is somebody asking a lot of questions. Even if they're just simple questions. So you've got to build a level of trust as well. So you have to work. It's not all the tool. It's got to be the user as well.
Yeah, correct. So yes. So if you're someone who says, hey, I really want to learn this modality and how to ask the right kind of questions, conceptualize people, and get down to the core of the stuff very quickly. But if you yourself are very insecure about your own abilities, if you're very anxious, if you're quick to be judgmental, then people can pick that up off of you very quickly, and they're going to know that you're not safe to do that, because 70% of the therapeutic process is safety.
Absolutely, and that's why it takes so long, because they've got to build that trust and everything else. And you don't want people treating this thing like it's the quickie lube of psychology. It's like drive in, I'll fix you, you get out, and then that's it. You've still got to treat them as an individual and as a client, and as you would.
Just one caveat on that. As far as the SEMA is concerned, some people I know are very, very distrusting because of the experience they had in their life. Me being a male therapist, men sometimes get a very bad rap, and so people are more distrusting the fact that I'm a male. And I just want to say, the way I pose my questions when I go through this is I'm asking more about the symptoms, not necessarily give me all your dirt necessarily.
Right.
I'm asking about the symptoms, and they're usually okay to start going on the shallow end of the pool and answering those questions. And then towards the end of the SEMA, I have a part on it, which is the timeline, and then I'll say, if you feel comfortable enough. And usually by that point, as I kind of offer information, I ask questions, I deconstruct things a little bit, and you can see them kind of absorbing what's happening. You can see it's starting to connect with them. usually there's a little bit more of an openness. And then I say, as far as what you have on your timeline is concerned, are there any really traumatic events that when you think about it, it really jabs you, like emotionally, you feel it in your body? And some people are much more forthcoming about it. Some people, especially in the addiction field, like usually I see one of two people. Some people are so tired of themselves and they're so exhausted with being on the same cycle, never breaking out of it, that if they perceive someone can help them, they're desperate to give you everything, because they just want to know what to do, because they feel lost. And there's other people that aren't really done, and they're too afraid to look at themselves, and they don't have the courage to face the abyss of their own soul and their own depravity yet. And they're not there yet, And so for them, I can still go through the assessment, I can still build a lot of rapport, and I can still offer them a lot of information and give them some very relevant steps and say, hey, we can work on this. But the rapport is so important.
Yeah.
It's critical to have that, because if you don't have rapport, then you're not going to be able to do anything.
So you design these steps in this evaluation as being very critical in following these steps, as far as these questions are put in order to build trust and to build confidence as you answer them.
Yes.
You wouldn't want to hit them with that last question first, because it would be overwhelming.
Yeah.
So and I like that because as you go, you tend to build a little confidence in the fact that, oh, okay, this isn't so bad.
Right.
And even if things get a little bit harder, they're not sensing that because it's not right out of the gate.
Exactly. It's a very subtle exposure into some of those heavier.
Now, a lot of people just have, because at the end of the day, what this tool is used for, this evaluation is used for, is to identify some core issues, core problems that they can work on. It's not fixing those problems. Yeah. It's an identification tool. It's like running a diagnostic on a car.
It's a diagnostic.
You got all those parts and pieces. You got to find out what you're going to work on. Because without that diagnostic, you could be fixing the front axle and the only thing wrong is a muffler in the back. You have no clue.
Right.
So you need this diagnostic, and you need it sometimes quickly, because people are in crisis, especially with addiction.
Yes, they are.
So this is all good, but so many people are so absolutely clueless about themselves and what's going on inside of them, or they've buried it so deep. I can honestly say there's a lot of memories that I no longer have. They have gone away. So does this still help with somebody who is that absolutely clueless about their own trauma, their own core, their own issues? Does it work with them?
I would say emphatically yes, because it organizes and I take all this stuff in a very human, strength-based way, and I present it to them in a way that just helps them de-shame and understand why they're doing what they're doing, and to offer something like, hey, I think you're intelligently designed for meaningful, deep, connected relationships with yourself and other people, where there's safety, there's trust, there's reciprocity, there's love, there's boundaries, you have your own purpose in your life, and whatever may have happened in your past that would have kind of hijacked that or got you off course, well, how do I help you understand where you got off, and maybe some things that you need to go back to the basics, what you really need. So even if they don't have great insight into themselves, just the fact that they have manifesting certain problems, this is the cool part about it, is regardless of who you are, you're still going to have certain problems in your life. Like if I'm an emotional masker and I'm chronically dishonest with people, well, there's a reason why I'm doing this. People in my experience typically lie for one of two reasons. The first, and the one that I think is probably the minority of them, is some people just lie because they have no value for people, and they're just a means to an end, and they don't really care at all what people think. I'm gonna get what I want, and my life is just about my own ambitions. This is a small majority of people. Right. The other kind of people lie because they're typically afraid of judgment or abandonment or rejection, and so they'll either go through a grandiose kind of a way of thinking and really embellish on things that aren't true because they want people to look at them a certain way, or they'll omit and hide information because if I told you the truth, number one, I don't like that about myself, or number two, I know it's going to upset you, and if it upsets you, depending on my experience and what's trapped in my emotional template, if there's conflict, that could mean to abandonment in my family of origin. We never repaired, we never talked about it, and that's dreadful for me as an adult. And so people can go through these kind of experiences and not even understand why. And I just try to make them very human, and say, I see you and I get you. And I just want to let you know there's a time in your life maybe you felt you had to do this. But if I can kind of bring something that's down in the subconscious and the darkness, let me just bring it up to the light. where all things have to come to the light eventually. You don't have to do this anymore. And if you're authentic and if you are who you are, when you know people like you, then there's no question, as opposed to you being in a state of fawning and trying to anticipate what does Scott expect me to be, what does Scott need me to be, so he likes me, he approves of me, and I'm always putting on an act, and there's constant pressure to perform. I don't have to do that. I'm allowed to be who I am, and if I am who I am, then I know you like me for me.
Right.
Because the way I see it, Scott, we got a 50-50 chance that someone's going to like you or not like you for a number of different reasons that they may not even be aware of. Right? There's people that I really, really gravitate towards and I really like, and there's people that I'm not. They have a very off-putting sense to me. You know, for nothing purposeful they've ever done to me, but something about someone's energy, something about anything.
It's an alignment. You can't align with everybody.
Exactly.
It's just not possible.
Exactly. But for a person who's chronically deceitful, or who's always lying about something, or who is in a constant state of being in this grandiosity of thought, which is really goes into more of the criteria of narcissistic tendencies, where everything's about them all the time. It's always about them. That's there for a reason. And really, what it is, in the same way that being a hero child is a survival strategy, narcissism is an extreme form of avoidance, because there's something about myself that I desperately don't want you to see, and I'm going to cover it with this. Flip to the other side in this extreme measure of, let me show you how amazing I am and how talented I am and like how confident I am, and like you don't mean anything, it detaches from our authentic self.
Right.
It's just an extreme form of avoidance. That's all it is. And even people that have narcissistic tendencies, they may not even be aware of why it's there. Most of them aren't. And it's not that they're bad people, but some people just don't understand what's happening inside of them. And so if I could ever create an x-ray of the soul and to have a diagnostic tool to say, let's plug into the computer port of the car and see what's happening under the engine, this is what the SEMA is. And I've been doing this assessment for 6 years, and I can tell you with a probably count on one hand how many people were really just flat out didn't want to answer, didn't want to participate, they want to try to BS me. I'm like, okay, dude.
Well, I would assume, there's no one thing that works for everybody, and I understand that. And I would assume this works for the majority of the people out there, probably in the 90 percentile.
I was going to tell you, as far as my experience with it and the feedback I get from the people that I do the SEMA with, everybody walks out of there with a much clearer sense of themselves. Yeah. They feel understood, and I'm essentially batting 1,000.
I would say probably there's some certain lines when you get to certain mental illnesses that are of the extreme nature,
100%.
where there is a split from their personality, or not from their personality, but from their self, their core self. A split so severe that there is no sense of self anymore.
100%.
And there are certain mental illnesses that do that, but that's why I'm saying that's probably getting into maybe 5% of people who are that extreme.
100%.
But everyone else is.
Yeah.
If there's any chance of looking inward, this is a great tool to use.
Yeah, it works for everybody, regardless of who you are.
And what is the sense of relief that people get? Now, again, we're not solving a problem using SEMA. It's not, we're not doing the magic genie and everything's better.
Correct.
But it's simply a way of saying, all right, we found a core issue that may be causing a lot of the pain in your life.
Yes.
Do people get a sense of relief? I mean, obviously, sometimes maybe they're a little disturbed by it, but is there an overall sense of relief that now I know what's going on?
Yeah, I've had people go through the whole SEMA assessment, and at the end, they were so relieved that they finally could see it for what it was. They just broke it down in tears, and they just cried, and they're like, "Thank you so much. I finally see it." And there's other people that they get exposed, but I never do kind of the final conceptualization part of how I understand that person. I never do it in a way that's ever intended to be judgmental or shaming,
not,
ever.
Yeah.
But some people have never looked at something, or it's such a deep source of shame. I've had people actually literally run out of the room a couple times.
Sure.
They're like, "I'm out of here, man. I don't want to talk to this dude because this guy." It's like I'm being seen, and it's like, well, what's wrong with being seen? And this is the problem with shame.
Yeah.
Shame is the master emotion that fuels all addiction. And do you really see me? And if you do see me, based upon my experiences in my life, are you going to reject me? Are you going to be there? Will you really actually love me? Are you safe? Can I count on you? And these are big questions. And some people live their whole life going through a superhuman effort to go through gymnastics in their mind and justify and compartmentalize and do a number of things because they're so afraid that if there's something about myself that I so profoundly reject, if that comes out and you see it, then I don't know if there's going to be enough love to see beyond that and see the potential and the good in me, and to still, am I still safe with you? And for the addict to go through the whole process of recovery, this is what it is. It's the process of being seen and challenging all of those shame-based belief systems. And this is what I call in the SEMA as the heart wounds. These heart wounds are these events in our life that we've assigned a meaning to. And that could be, number one, I'm simply not good enough. So you see people that live their life in chronic sabotage, chronic avoidance, chronic anxiety, always just, they see a molehill in front of them and automatically they assume it's a mountain, and they just get paralyzed and they just go self-medicate and they sabotage. Because something in their heart, whenever I come into an agreement with a lie in my heart, that's what gives us its power. It's not the fact that I've been exposed to it, it's the fact that the power comes from the agreement.
Right.
So some of the questions I ask people on the heart wound side is, and I'll just go through in a really simple way, like, do you believe at the core, like, you're not good enough for whatever it may, fill in the blank? And if they say, and that would manifest through sabotage, extreme avoidance, indecisiveness, a couple different things, and they'll say yes, and I'm gonna mark that on their thing, and that's going to be one of our treatment goals, and that's going to be the way we're going to handle that, is going to be through planning, accountability, some strategy, and having a lot of courage and confronting and really processing this issue. Another heart wound would be like, if people really knew me, they wouldn't love me. Does that feel true to you? And they're like, yeah, it feels true. I'm like, well, no wonder you hide and you wear a mask your whole life, and no wonder you're so lonely, Because again, you have to respect what's in your DNA. You have to respect the fact that we're made for really deeply connected, loving relationships. And anything in our life that is twisted and warped and keeps us away from that is chronic pain.
Right.
This is something that fuels the human soul, is to be connected to ourselves and other people.
It's almost like we set up a society that kills the human soul in a way, because there's so many pressures on us and so many things that take us away from that.
Yeah.
Kindness and the love and
Totally.
And being sincere and honest and your authentic self. Everything's about appearance, and everything's about putting on airs and doing this.
Totally.
Forget addiction and alcoholism and all those things. Everyday people, we are so inundated every day with ways not to be ourselves.
It's everywhere. We live in a culture that promotes, in the worst ways, being numbed out and being constantly distracted, and always pursuing what you're told to do. Honestly, there's something that I've noticed. It's like people are in this state of always wanting to improve themselves, live your best life, go do this, be in the best shape, have the most financial security, have the best kids, have the nicest car, we're always in this addiction of constant self-improvement all the time. The newest thing that comes out, everyone's all over it until they realize it doesn't live up to the hype. And people are always searching for something. And what I've noticed as a therapist is that sometimes the way people really mature and they grow and they connect to themselves is they stop for a second the need to always just run towards self-improvement and just stop and grieve the losses and grieve the things that have happened in their life, and grieve the things that haven't been there, and for the people that never had the chance to have a real childhood, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Because
trauma and very broken, unhealthy people took that from them. It's a profound loss. And people spend their whole life just, it's almost like people that are always in control and they're always workaholics and they're always moving, it's like the second you stop, if they were to really stop and sit with us for a second, the second you stop moving, whatever it is you're running from is going to catch you, right? And maybe the thing that catches you is your authentic self saying, please pay attention to what's going on in your soul. Please pay attention, feel something and deal with something, acknowledge it. And if you do that, there's always a sense of relief, but the scary part is what we don't know,
Yes.
And so part of the therapeutic process is just to try to deconstruct some of that lay it out in a way that makes sense. Like, it's totally okay to not have all the answers. It's totally okay. It's like, it's okay to be afraid of something. So use the courage inside of you to confront the things that you avoid. And some people are really high functioning and great at doing things in life, and other people, they're not. They're really bad at doing a lot of things, and they need to learn to develop the skills. They need help and they need trust, but they're ashamed. And there's usually someone in their life that keeps them from experiencing a lot of pain that comes from not doing this. So the therapeutic process is just to try to kind of get a good read on the field they're on, where they're at, what are you running from, what are the beliefs inside of you that you are giving all this power to, and hopefully by speaking some truth, just to say, hey, you know what, I know you've done this your whole life, but can I just tell you there was a time you needed to, but you really don't have to do that anymore. It's actually okay. How about, and so this job of, in this incredible privilege, not even a job, this privilege of working with people, because it is, people's souls are sacred, to see someone where they are and to encourage them and to say, it's kind of like reparenting in a way. It's like, hey, you were kind of conditioned to think this way and act this way, and, you can look at toxic masculinity, well, men don't show their emotions, and, this and that, and I'm just going to go do whatever this is, but I'm not going to stop and feel these things. To give them the tools to be able to do that, no matter where they are. Mm-hmm. This is really what the premise of therapy is. It's reparenting, and I mean, I work with people older than me, and it's okay. As long as what I'm saying is truthful, there's a kind of a substance and a richness to my words, and the tone and the energy that's coming from is very loving and very safe. And I'm discerning about it. They're typically much more open to it. And some people aren't willing to let go of certain things. We can get down and hammer it, and they're not. And I say, okay, you're not ready, and I respect that, and that's okay.
Well, listen, just because you're identifying these core issues, these problems, these traumas, or whatever they might be that are motivating them in the direction that they've gone, even identifying those, it's not a guarantee that they're going to be able to handle them or fix them. But at least it's gotten some error, and the possibility of repairing the damage is there. Yeah. The stuff that's not identified, it's 100%, it's not going to change. But the stuff that is identified, you've got a good shot at recovering and doing well.
100%.
And that's really, but you need that starting point. And the starting point is the SEMA that you have, mm-hmm. that you have developed. Now you do train people to do this. Is this correct?
That's correct. So we do train people, anyone who's really a helping professional. My heart with the SEMA is, like, my vision for it is to do more trainings and to really equip helping professionals to learn this basic tool and to really start to refine your ability to conceptualize people the right way. Some people are open to it. Some people are not. Some people have been in the field for a long time. They're like, well, I got my way. This is what I do. It works for me. And that's okay. I respect that. I respect it. That's what you want to do, and it works for you, and you have your population that you click with. Awesome. And that's what no worries. God bless you. But
it seems to me, though, that this would be really awesome, because without some sort of evaluation and some sort of tool to recognize at least maybe a part of what you should be looking at, you could spend a lot of time in the minutia of the day-to-day reactions and actions, yes, and not talking about the causes.
100%. Yeah, and if you think about it, so many people go to treatment, in and out, in and out, in and out, and they get a lot of groups on boundaries. They get a lot of groups that are step-based, and those are all good. Trust me, I'm a big advocate for step stuff, 100%. And honestly, I think every human being on the planet would be a better human if they went to the 12 steps, to be honest. I really do.
Yes.
But so it's nothing against that. But if they only get the behavioral issues and there's not something going down deeper to the root of these things, it's like I have a landscape company comes by and they cut the grass and they trim the hedges and they do all these things, but if you don't pull the root out, it just grows right back. Yeah. And this is the madness of addiction. Is there's something, if it's coming back, that means that the root is still alive and is grounded somewhere, and that means you got to go deeper. And so for a lot of people, they lose hope and they give up on therapy that, unfortunately, and the problem with a lot of treatment centers per se is most of them are so many clients are just looking for individual attention and they don't get it. The therapists are always overwhelmed. It's just typically trying to prevent people from leaving early. There's a lot of chaos. They're not always structured the best. And people are really looking for something. They want help, and they want individual specific help, and they want to understand it, but they don't. And there's not a lot of training that really equips therapists to help people, which is very sad, because when you're talking about a multi-billion-dollar industry, and the success rate is between 3 and 5% of people that stay sober long term, which is there's a big problem there.
It is, and I think if you took your car to the mechanic and he only fixed it properly 3% of the time,
you wouldn't go back.
You wouldn't go back, or
Yeah.
you get rid of that car because you realize it's a dud, it's not working. You would look for something new. Anything that you do that only works 3% of the time, you'd look for a better way of doing it. But treatment hasn't done that.
They haven't.
We haven't looked at that, and what we've got to do is look beyond. And you say you like the 12 steps. The truth is the 12 steps is not about alcohol and drugs. It's about personal improvement.
Yes.
Which is good, but you still need that help to find out who that person is that you're trying to improve.
Yeah.
By getting down to your core issues and figuring out what you really want to fix.
Yes.
Again, if you keep losing air in your tire, putting air in it over and over again, you will consistently get a flat until the tire becomes unusable. And that's really what we're saying with that addiction. You can put air in it for a little while, but sooner or later, you're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
Unless you figure out why is it leaking, where is the cause, and that's what you're talking about.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what are the shame-based belief systems that
Yes.
have remained in the dark that people don't quite see. They just get a feeling that makes them feel bad, but they don't really understand what it is, or they don't know how to overcome it. And so people just need the tools, and people need to be able to understand it in a very humanizing, de-shaming way. It's like, hey, you're just human. We all know that, and it's okay. But if there's something inside of you that does really want emotional freedom to break free from these addictions, and again, most of this stuff that gets attention is because people have a drug and alcohol addiction and they end up going to treatment. But think about how many millions and millions of Americans have porn addictions, relationship addictions, shopping addictions.
Just crippling anxiety and stress.
Crippling anxiety and stress, and they have no idea how to deal with that, and they don't meet criteria to go to treatment. And so there's not a lot out there for people, just your average person that just needs a chance to go and to have a space and to do some self-evaluation, to go through an x-ray machine of what's my soul, where am I at, what's in my heart that I'd like to do that I'm afraid to do, and to have a chance to do some really good self-care, because we live in a world, as we said, that it's always demanding, constant pressure, filled with so many things that are just numbing and distracting, and it's not attached to the human soul.
There are very few things in this world that are designed to improve your own self, your authentic self.
Yeah.
It's all designed to say, your authentic self isn't good enough. You have to wear these sneakers. You have to have this job.
Yeah.
You have to drive this car. You have to live in this neighborhood. And there is no room for your authentic self in that rat race.
Yeah, you have to fit in at all costs, and so go spend money that you don't have to buy things you don't need to impress people you don't know.
See, I'm good, though, because keeping up with the Joneses, I'm already there.
Yeah, you are. That's true, you are.
So if somebody wants to learn more about this, talk to you about possibly getting certified. I know you're talking about possibly doing an online course sometime soon, but right now, if they want to contact you and learn more, how can they get a hold of you?
So right now, my partner and I, we both facilitate SEMAs for individuals. We do Zoom things. We're going to be doing a training next month. We'll have more information on that. But so you could contact www.flourishtherapypractice.com, and I'll be there with my partner Monica, and we will we both see individuals for this. And we both can facilitate trainings. I've gone to a number of treatment centers, and I've kind of pitched to some of the clinical directors or the owners, and I said, listen, I would like to really try to help your clients, and I'll come in, I can teach your staff, and I'm always very, very reasonable. It's just to cover some of my time, because my heart is to really empower people,
right,
to know how to do this so they can affect people that they know and they work with directly.
Which is why we get along so well, because we're both we have a similar mission. Me with the Addiction Training Center and training people to be interventionists and helping identify addiction and get somebody the help that they need. But then the proper help is where you come in and getting the right diagnosis so that you can deal with your stuff. I think it's great. The information for Travis's website is right there on your screen. I want everybody to check it out. Reach out. I know, Travis, you're willing to talk to anybody if they have any questions.
Anybody, no problem.
Give him a shout. Look for the next training, and there will be more. Trust me. And it does carry 12 CEUs for those who need the CEUs. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. The training offers 12 CEUs.
So make sure you check it out. And Travis, I want to thank you for your time, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Today.
We'll have to get together again, and we'll talk more about this. I'd love to get in more depth.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm all for it.
All right, fantastic.
Cool. Awesome.
You've been watching Spotlight on Addiction and Recovery right here, coming to you from the ATC Network. If you like this show or any of our other shows, make sure that you click the like button and subscribe to our channel so that you'll get alerts when we come out with new material. But for now, I'm Scott Jones, your host, with our guest, Travis Gray. We want to thank you for joining us. We'll catch you next time.